The limousine arrived at midnight, and Juliet Fairchild knew immediately that something had gone terribly wrong. She stood in the rain outside the airport terminal, her cheap coat doing nothing against the downpour, watching as a sleek black vehicle pulled up to the curb with supernatural precision. The driver who emerged looked like something from a Gothic painting, pale skin that seemed to glow in the darkness, movements too fluid to be entirely human. He opened an umbrella and approached her with an expression of cool indifference. "Miss Delacroix?" he asked, his accent thick with something Eastern European and ancient. Juliet's stomach dropped. "No, Please, miss, we haven't time. Lord Jareth is waiting." Before she could correct him again, he was guiding her toward the limousine with a hand that felt ice-cold even through her sleeve. Juliet stumbled along, her size making her movements awkward in the rain, her mind racing. Delacroix, that was the name of the woman she'd been hired to impersonate for exactly 3 hours at a corporate event. A simple job. Show up, smile, pretend to be the reclusive heiress who hated public appearances, collect $5,000. Enough to pay her mother's medical bills for another month. But this wasn't the corporate event. This was something else entirely. The interior of the limousine was more luxurious than anything Juliet had ever seen. Leather seats, ambient lighting that cast everything in shades of deep purple and gold, and sitting across from her, a man who made her breath catch in her throat. He was beautiful, in a way that hurt to look at. White hair fell to his shoulders, perfectly straight and gleaming like fresh snow. His skin was porcelain pale, flawless, and his eyes were the color of dark wine, deep red that shouldn't have been possible. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her entire year's salary, and he regarded her with an expression of mild interest. "Miss Delacroix," he said, and his voice was like velvet dragged across broken glass. "I am Jareth Presidium, King of the Northern Territories. We have much to discuss." Juliet's mouth went dry. King, territories, and those eyes, those impossible eyes. She'd heard rumors, of course. Everyone had. Whispers of vampires living among humans, ancient creatures with their own laws and kingdoms hidden beneath the modern world. But rumors were supposed to stay rumors. "I'm not," she started. "You are precisely who I need you to be." Jareth interrupted smoothly. The limousine began moving, pulling away from the curb with that same supernatural grace. "Your family has negotiated this arrangement for months. The treaty between the Delacroix bloodline and my house requires a union. We marry tonight." The world tilted. "Tonight? The ceremony has been prepared. The blood moon rises in 3 hours, an auspicious time for vampire marriages. Surely your family explained this to you." Juliet pressed herself back against the seat, her heart hammering. This was insane. This was beyond any job she'd agreed to. The real Delacroix heiress was probably somewhere laughing, having sent Juliet in her place as some kind of cruel joke. Or maybe she'd run, and everyone assumed the plus-size woman who'd shown up at the airport was her. Juliet had seen photos of the heiress online, a tall, willowy woman with sharp features. Nothing like Juliet's soft, round face and body that took up more space than society deemed acceptable. "I need to tell you something," Juliet said, forcing the words out. "There's been a mistake." Jareth leaned forward, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with danger. What kind of mistake? His eyes held hers, and Juliet found herself drowning in that wine-dark gaze. There was power there, old and terrible and absolute. This was a creature who had lived for centuries, who commanded others with a word, who could probably kill her without breaking a sweat. But there was something else, too. Loneliness. She saw it in the tight line of his jaw, the way his fingers gripped the armrest just a fraction too hard. Whatever this treaty was, whatever this marriage meant, it mattered to him. The lie formed on her tongue before she could stop it. Nothing, just nerves. She was going to hell. But $5,000 wouldn't even scratch the surface of what her mother needed. And if she could just get through tonight, maybe she could negotiate some kind of payment for this bizarre situation. Rich people paid for weird things all the time, right? Surely vampire kings did too. Jareth's expression softened almost imperceptibly. That's understandable. This is a significant change for both of us, but I promise you, Miss Delacroix, you will be safe in my house, protected. No harm will come to you as long as you bear my name. The conviction in his voice made something warm curl in Juliet's chest. She pushed it down. This was temporary. This was a mistake. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to fix it. The limousine carried them through the city, down into tunnels that Juliet hadn't known existed. Ancient brick gave way to carved stone, and then they were driving through caverns lit by thousands of candles. A whole world beneath the streets, invisible to the humans above. The castle, because there was no other word for it, rose from the cavern floor like something from a dark fairy tale. Gothic spires reached toward the stone ceiling, and windows glowed with warm light. Vampires moved through the courtyard, all of them sharing that same unearthly beauty, that same white hair and pale skin. They stared as Juliet emerged from the limousine. She saw the confusion in their faces, the way their eyes raked over her body. Too fat, too human, too wrong for their king. Juliet lifted her chin and tried to ignore the burning in her cheeks. She'd dealt with stares her whole life. These were just colder than most. Jareth appeared at her side, his hand settling on the small of her back. The touch was possessive, protective. "Anyone who speaks against my bride answers to me," he said quietly, but his voice carried across the courtyard. "Is that understood?" The vampires bowed as one. Juliet was swept inside into a world of dark wood and crimson silk. Servants human, she realized with a start, helped her out of her cheap coat and led her to chambers that could have housed her entire apartment building. A dress waited on the bed, white and flowing, clearly designed for a wedding. 30 minutes, miss," one of the servants said kindly. She was an older woman with gentle eyes. "I'll help you prepare." "What's your name?" Juliet asked as the woman began unlacing her wet clothes. "Mary, miss. I've served House Presidium for 20 years now." 20 years? Juliet couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "But you're human. Lord Jareth doesn't keep slaves, if that's what you're worried about," Mary said with a small smile. "We're paid well, treated fairly. He's a good man, well, vampire. Better than most humans I've known." She paused, then added softly, "He needs this marriage, miss. The other houses have been pushing for him to step down, saying he's too weak without an heir. This treaty with your family will secure his position." Guilt twisted in Juliet's stomach. But what could she do? Confess now and ruin everything? Jareth had been nothing but kind to her, in his cold, regal way, and the way he'd defended her in the courtyard. The dress fit perfectly, which seemed impossible given her size. But then, magic existed. Vampires existed. Why not enchanted dresses? Mary wove Juliet's dark hair into an intricate braid, adding small white flowers that seemed to glow in the candlelight. When Juliet finally looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked like she belonged in this Gothic fairy tale, soft and round and somehow beautiful in the white gown. "Stunning," Mary whispered. "He won't be able to look away." The ceremony took place in a great hall lit by hundreds of candles. Vampires lined the walls, their red eyes gleaming in the darkness. At the far end, Jareth waited, and when his gaze found Juliet, something flickered across his face. Surprise, appreciation, hunger, but not the dangerous kind. The kind that made heat pool in her belly. She walked to him on shaking legs, and when she reached his side, he took her hand. His skin was cold, but his grip was steady. A vampire in elaborate robes began speaking in a language Juliet didn't understand. Latin, maybe, or something older. Jareth translated in a low murmur, his lips close to her ear. "Do you come willingly to this union? Do you offer your loyalty, your trust, your blood to House Presidium?" Juliet should have said no. Should have stopped this madness. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "I do." "Do you accept Jareth Presidium as your husband, your protector, your king? Will you stand beside him through darkness and blood, through the long years of immortal life?" Immortal life. The words should have terrified her. But standing there in Jareth's presence, feeling the cold strength of his hand around hers, Juliet felt strangely calm. "I do." Jareth turned to her fully, and his free hand came up to cup her face. His thumb traced her cheek with unexpected tenderness. "By blood and shadow, I claim you as mine," he said. "No force in this world or any other will harm you. I swear it on my crown and my life." Then he leaned in, and Juliet's eyes fluttered closed. His lips met hers, cold but soft, and the kiss sent electricity racing through her veins. When he pulled back, his eyes had darkened to the color of fresh blood, and Juliet could see the sharp points of his fangs behind his lips. "One more thing," he murmured so quietly only she could hear. "The bond requires blood, just a drop. May I?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. Jareth lifted her hand to his mouth and pressed his lips to her wrist. She felt the brief, sharp pain of his fangs, and then something else, a rush of sensation, warm and overwhelming, like being wrapped in silk and starlight. He drank for only a moment before pulling back, his tongue tracing over the wound to seal it. "Bound," he said, and the word echoed through the hall. The vampires erupted into applause, though many looked troubled. The feast afterward was surreal. Juliet sat beside Jareth at a long table while vampires brought out dishes for the human guests and goblets of what could only be blood for themselves. Jareth kept her close, one hand resting on her thigh beneath the table, and every time someone approached with even a hint of hostility in their eyes, he would level them with a look that could have frozen fire. "You're not eating," he observed quietly. "I'm not hungry." It was a lie. Juliet was starving, but the elaborate dishes intimidated her, and she was hyper-aware of the stares still coming her way. Jareth frowned. He signaled a servant and murmured something. Minutes later, a simpler plate appeared: roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, comfort food. He'd noticed and adjusted without making a scene about it. "Thank you," Juliet said, surprised by the consideration. "You're my wife now," Jareth replied, as if that explained everything. "Your comfort is my responsibility." She ate, and Jareth watched her with that strange intensity. When she caught him staring, he didn't look away. "You're different than I expected," he admitted. Juliet's stomach clenched. "How so?" "The reports said you were cold, ambitious, interested only in the political advantages of this union." His thumb moved in slow circles on her thigh, probably an unconscious gesture. "But you seemed nervous, almost frightened, yet you went through with the ceremony anyway." "Maybe I'm just good at hiding things." "Maybe." But he sounded unconvinced. The feast continued for hours. Vampires danced to strange, haunting music. Jareth was called away several times to speak with members of his court, and each time he left, Juliet felt exposed. The stares grew bolder, the whispers louder. "That's the Delacroix heiress? I expected someone more refined. Look at her. How can he stand to touch something so... Perhaps the blood will be worth it, though I can't imagine there's much strength in that soft body." Juliet gripped her wine glass hard enough to hurt. She'd heard worse in her life. She'd survived worse. But something about hearing it here, in this place where she was supposed to be a queen, made it cut deeper. A hand settled on her shoulder, pale, cold, belonging to a vampire woman with silver eyes and a cruel smile. "You must tell me, dear. How exactly did your family negotiate this treaty? What could the Delacroix line possibly offer that would make our king accept, well, you?" "Remove your hand," Jareth's voice cut through the hall like a blade, "or I will remove it for you." The vampire woman jerked back as if burned. Jareth had appeared out of nowhere, moving with that impossible speed, and now he stood between Juliet and the crowd with murder in his eyes. "Anyone else wish to insult my bride?" he asked softly. The silence was absolute. "No? Good, because the next person who speaks against her will find themselves banished from the Northern Territories. I don't care about your rank or your bloodline. She is your queen now, and you will treat her with respect." He turned and offered Juliet his hand. "Come, we're retiring for the night." Juliet let him lead her from the hall, her heart pounding. They walked through corridors of carved stone until they reached a chamber even more opulent than the one she'd prepared in. A massive bed dominated the space, draped in dark velvet. Candles flickered everywhere, casting dancing shadows. Jareth released her hand and moved to pour himself a drink from a crystal decanter. His movements were stiff, controlled, angry. "I apologize," he said, without turning. "I should have anticipated that reaction. Should have prepared them better." "It's fine," Juliet lied. "It's not fine." He spun to face her, and the fury in his expression took her breath away. "You are under my protection now. That means something. It means everything. Those vipers in my court will learn that, or they will find themselves without a court to call home." Juliet sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the evening was draining away, leaving only the crushing weight of her deception. This man, this vampire king, was defending her honor, protecting her, treating her like something precious, and she was lying to him, had lied to him from the first moment. "Jareth," she said quietly, "we need to talk." He crossed to her immediately, kneeling so they were at eye level. The gesture was so unexpected, so humble from a king, that tears pricked Juliet's eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked. His cold hand came up to cup her face again, that same tender gesture from the ceremony. "Are you hurt? Did someone—" "I'm not who you think I am." The words hung between them. Jareth went very still. "My name is Juliet Fairchild," she continued, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "I'm not the Delacroix heiress. I was hired to impersonate her at an event. Your driver picked me up by mistake, and I should have corrected him immediately. Should have told you the truth, but I didn't, and now we're married, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The silence stretched. Jareth's expression was unreadable, his hand still against her face. Then slowly he began to laugh. It wasn't the reaction Juliet had expected. The sound was low and dark and somehow bitter. Jareth stood, running a hand through his white hair, and when he looked at her again, there was something almost like relief in his eyes. "Of course," he said. "Of course you're not really her. I should have known." "You're not angry?" "Oh, I'm furious," Jareth assured her. "But not at you. At the Delacroix family, who clearly orchestrated this to humiliate me. At myself, for not realizing sooner." He paused. "Though in my defense, I'd never met the real heiress. We negotiated everything through intermediaries." "So what happens now?" Juliet asked. Her voice felt very small. "Can we annul the marriage?" Jareth's eyes snapped to hers, suddenly sharp. "Is that what you want? Juliet faltered. What did she want? To go back to her tiny apartment, her 3 jobs, her slow drowning in debt? To never see the strange, beautiful vampire king again? The thought made her chest ache. "I don't know." "The marriage bond is done," Jareth said, moving closer. "We drank from each other well, I drank from you. That's binding in vampire law. Unbreakable, actually. Even if we wanted to annul it, we couldn't." "Oh." The word came out breathless. "However," Jareth continued, "I could release you. Send you back to the surface with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your human life. You'd be free, safe. No one would know about tonight." He was offering her an out, a generous one. Juliet should have taken it, should have thanked him and walked away from this madness. Instead, she asked, "What if I stayed?" Jareth went very still again, but this time there was something like hope in his face. "Why would you want to?" "You defended me," Juliet said simply. "No one's ever done that before. You looked at me like I was beautiful, like I mattered. And I know it's crazy, and I know we just met, but—" She took a shaky breath. "What if I want to see where this goes?" Jareth was in front of her before she could blink, his hands on her shoulders, his wine dark eyes searching her face. "You understand what you're saying? If you stay, you're choosing this life. You're choosing me. Eventually, if you want to truly be my equal, you'd need to be turned, to become vampire. That's not a decision to make lightly." "I'm not making it now," Juliet said. "I'm just asking for time to figure this out, to see if what I'm feeling is real." "And what are you feeling?" She met his gaze steadily. "Like maybe I was supposed to get in that limousine. Like maybe the mistake was actually fate." Jareth's thumb traced her lower lip, and the gesture was so intimate that Juliet's breath hitched. "I felt something when I first saw you," he admitted, "walking toward me in that dress. You were so beautiful it hurt, soft and real, and nothing like the cold political alliance I'd resigned myself to. I thought it was just attraction. But now I think maybe fate is exactly the right word." He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. Juliet's hands came up to tangle in his white hair, and she felt him shudder at the touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jareth rested his forehead against hers. "Stay tonight," he murmured. "Just sleep beside me. Let me hold you. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest." They undressed without ceremony, Jareth helping her out of the elaborate gown, Juliet trying not to feel self-conscious as he saw her body fully for the first time, but there was no judgment in his eyes. Only desire and something softer. In bed, he pulled her against him, his cold body pressed to her warm one. Juliet should have been uncomfortable. Instead, she felt safer than she had in years. "Tell me about your life," Jareth said into the darkness. "Your real life. I want to know everything." So she did. She told him about her mother's illness, about working 3 jobs just to keep their heads above water, about the plus-size modeling agency that had hired her for the Delacroix job promising easy money, about growing up never quite fitting in, always too much in a world that wanted women to take up less space. Jareth listened without interruption, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her arm. When she finished, he said, "Your mother. What does she need? Cancer treatment, but it's expensive, and insurance only covers so much. I'll take care of it." Juliet pushed up on her elbow to look at him. "You can't just—" "I can and I will," Jareth interrupted firmly. "You're my wife, Juliet. That makes your family my family. Your mother will have the best care available. Money is not an issue." Tears spilled down Juliet's cheeks before she could stop them. Jareth wiped them away with cold fingers, his expression infinitely gentle. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that for someone you don't even know?" "Because you're crying," he said simply. "Because you've carried this burden alone for too long, and because I can. Let me help you, Juliet. Let me be what you need." She kissed him, then pouring everything she couldn't say into the press of her lips against his. Jareth responded with careful restraint, clearly holding himself back. When she tried to deepen the kiss, he pulled away with a rueful smile. "Not yet," he said. "When we do this, I want you to be certain. No doubts, no fears, just us." Juliet nodded, settling back against his chest. His hand stroked through her hair, and slowly, impossibly, she drifted to sleep in the arms of a vampire king. She woke to chaos. Jareth was already out of bed, fully dressed in black leather that looked designed for battle. Vampires filled the chamber, all talking at once in urgent voices. Greet attacked the eastern border. "Delacroix forces, my lord. They are claiming the marriage is invalid, demanding you surrender the girl." Jareth held up a hand and silence fell. "Explain." Slowly. One of the vampires, a tall man with scars crossing his pale face, stepped forward. "The Delacroix family has allied with House Sanguine. They're claiming you kidnapped their daughter and married an impostor. They're using it as grounds to challenge your rule of the Northern Territories." Juliet's blood ran cold. This was her fault. Her lie had started a war. "How many forces?" Jareth asked calmly. 200 vampires, maybe more. They'll reach the castle within the hour. Then we prepare for siege." Jareth's voice was cold, commanding. Every inch the warrior king. "Reinforce the gates, arm the guard, and get me—" "No." Juliet was out of bed before she realized she was moving. "No, you can't fight them, not because of me." Jareth turned to her, and his expression softened fractionally. "Juliet." "I'll go to them. I'll explain. Maybe if I turn myself in, they'll leave you alone." "Absolutely not." The words cracked like a whip. Jareth crossed to her in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. "Do you understand what they'd do to you? You're human, weak in their eyes. They'd tear you apart to make a point. But your kingdom can burn for all I care if keeping it means losing you." The chamber went silent. The vampires stared at their king with expressions of shock. Jareth seemed to realize what he'd said. He released Juliet and turned back to his people, shoulders rigid. "That came out wrong. What I meant—" "You meant what you said," the scarred vampire interrupted. There was something like approval in his voice. "And you're right. We don't negotiate with House Sanguine. We fight. Lucian, you've led us for 3 centuries, my lord. You've never once chosen the easy path when honor demanded otherwise. We won't ask you to start now." Lucian glanced at Juliet, and she was surprised to see respect in his eyes. "Besides, I like her. Anyone who makes you lose your legendary composure is worth fighting for." One by one, the other vampires nodded. Their earlier hostility had transformed into something else. Loyalty, determination. Jareth looked at them for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Arm yourselves. We hold the castle. No one touches my wife." The vampires dispersed, moving with military precision. Only Lucian remained, and Jareth turned to him with an expression Juliet couldn't read. "If things go badly," Jareth said quietly, "get her out. Take her to the surface. Make sure she's safe." "Things won't go badly," Lucian replied. "But yes, you have my word." Then he was gone, and Juliet was alone with Jareth. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in her boat. This vampire king barely knew her, and he was willing to risk everything. It didn't make sense, except it did. Because she'd risk everything for him too, and they'd only had one night together. "I need you to do something for me," Jareth said, pulling her close. "Stay in these chambers. Don't leave for any reason. I'll have guards posted outside. I want to help. You are helping, by being safe, by giving me a reason to end this quickly and return to you." His lips brushed her forehead. I've lived a long time, Juliet. Centuries of battles and bloodshed and political games. None of it mattered until last night. You make it matter. Do you understand? Juliet nodded against his chest, breathing in his scent, something like winter and ancient stone. When this is over, Jareth continued, we'll do this properly. Court you the way you deserve. Take you to the surface for dates and romantic dinners and all the human traditions I've forgotten how to perform. I'll prove to you that choosing me wasn't a mistake. It wasn't, Juliet said fiercely. It isn't. He kissed her one last time and then he was gone, moving with that supernatural speed. Juliet stood in the empty chamber, her heart racing, and tried not to think about all the ways this could end badly. The guards appeared moments later, 2 female vampires who introduced themselves as Elena and Sophia. They positioned themselves outside the door, their expressions grim but not unkind. Is there anything you need, my lady? Elena asked. My lady? The title felt surreal, but Juliet shook her head. Just tell me what's happening. Please, don't let me sit here in the dark. Elena and Sophia exchanged glances. Then Sophia nodded. We can do that. The battle began with a sound like thunder. Juliet felt it through the stone floor, a vibration that rattled her bones. Elena provided running commentary, her voice steady despite the violence happening below. They've breached the outer courtyard. Lord Jareth is leading the defense personally. Of course he is, the fool. Oh, nice move. He just took down 3 of them without breaking a sweat. Is he hurt? Juliet demanded. Not that I can see. He's magnificent, actually. Remind me why we were all skeptical about this marriage? Any vampire who fights like that for his mate deserves respect. Hours crawled by. The sounds of battle continued, sometimes close, sometimes distant. Juliet paced the chamber like a caged animal, every instinct screaming at her to do something, anything. Then Elena hissed a warning. Someone's coming! Fast! The door burst open, and a vampire Juliet didn't recognize stood there, male, with wild eyes and blood on his clothes. Not his blood, she realized. He'd been fighting. Found her, he called over his shoulder. The false bride. Lord Sanguin wants her brought to the main hall. Elena and Sophia moved as one, placing themselves between Juliet and the intruder. You'll have to go through us, Elena said coldly. That can be arranged. More vampires poured into the chamber. Too many. Elena and Sophia fought with desperate fury, but they were outnumbered. Juliet watched in horror as Sophia went down, and then Elena, both of them overpowered by sheer numbers. Hands grabbed Juliet, cold and bruising. She fought, kicking and screaming, but it was useless. They dragged her from the chamber through corridors slick with blood until they reached the great hall where she'd been married just hours before. The scene was chaos. Vampires fought in brutal close combat, the air thick with the scent of blood and violence. And in the center of it all, Jareth battled a vampire who could only be Lord Sanguin, taller than Jareth, with white hair streaked with red and eyes like burning coals. Jareth! Juliet's scream cut through the noise. Jareth's head snapped toward her, and in that moment of distraction, Sanguin struck. His blade, some kind of enchanted weapon that glowed with dark light, sliced across Jareth's chest. Jareth staggered, and Juliet watched in horror as blood, impossibly red, bloomed across his white shirt. Stop! She screamed. Please stop! I'll go with you. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt him. Sanguin smiled, revealing fangs longer than Jareth's. Too late for that, little human. This isn't about you anymore. This is about power, about putting the Northern Territories under proper leadership. He raised his blade for a killing blow. Juliet didn't think. She wrenched free from the vampires holding her. They'd loosened their grip, distracted by the fight, and ran. Ran faster than she'd ever moved in her life, her soft body propelled by pure terror and love. She threw herself between Sanguin and Jareth just as the blade came down. Pain exploded through her shoulder. She felt the blade slice deep, felt her blood hot and human spray across the stone floor. Then she was falling, and Jareth was catching her, his face a mask of fury and fear. No, he breathed. No, 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 Juliet, stay with me. Okay, she slurred. The world was going gray at the edges. You're okay. That's what matters. You foolish, brave, stupid woman. Jareth pressed his hand to her shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. Why would you do that? Same reason you'd burn your kingdom for me. Juliet managed a weak smile. Fate, remember? Jareth looked up, and his expression was terrifying. His eyes had gone completely red, his fangs fully extended, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. You hurt her, you made her bleed, and for that I will end you and everyone who follows you. I will burn House Sanguine to ash. I will make you beg for death before I grant it. This I swear on blood and shadow and every dark power that exists. He moved, and it was like watching a storm given form. Sanguine didn't stand a chance. Jareth tore into him with savage precision, and within seconds the older vampire was on his knees, his throat in Jareth's grip. Yield! Jareth commanded, and his voice echoed through the hall. All of you, yield, or watch your lord die. Sanguine's forces dropped their weapons. One by one, they knelt. We yield, Sanguine choked out. The northern territories are yours. I know they are. Jareth released him with a look of utter disdain. Get out, all of you, and tell every vampire house from here to the sea, House Presidium is not to be trifled with. My wife is under my protection, and anyone who threatens her answers to me. The enemy vampires fled. Jareth's own forces watched in awe as their king returned to Juliet, gathering her into his arms with infinite care. Stay awake, he murmured. Please, Juliet, stay with me. Tired? She whispered. I know, but I need you to listen. You're losing too much blood. Human healers won't be able to save you in time. His voice cracked. There's another way. I can turn you, give you my blood, and you'll become vampire. You'll heal, you'll live. But it's a choice, Juliet. Your choice. I won't make it for you. Juliet's vision was fading, but she understood what he was offering. Immortality, strength, life at Jareth's side for centuries instead of decades. But also darkness, blood, becoming something other than human. Will it hurt? She asked. Yes, but I'll be with you through all of it. And after, we'll have time to date and court and fall in love properly. We'll have eternity. Juliet thought of her mother, who Jareth had promised to care for, thought of her tiny apartment, her dead-end jobs, her life of barely surviving. Then she thought of Jareth's arms around her, his lips on hers, the way he had looked at her like she was precious. Okay, she breathed. Do it. Jareth bit his own wrist and dark blood welled up. He pressed it to Juliet's lips. Drink, he commanded, as much as you can. The blood tasted like copper and smoke and winter nights. Juliet drank, and power flooded through her veins. Her body convulsed, pain racing through every nerve, and she screamed against Jareth's wrist. But he held her steady, murmuring words in that ancient language, his free hand stroking her hair. The pain peaked, unbearable, and then suddenly it was gone, replaced by strength, by clarity, by senses so sharp it was overwhelming. Juliet gasped and opened her eyes that she somehow knew had changed color, turned red like all the vampires around her. There you are, Jareth said softly, and he was smiling, really smiling, wide and genuine and beautiful. Welcome to immortality, my love. Juliet sat up, and her body moved with that same supernatural grace she had seen in other vampires. The wound in her shoulder was gone, healed completely, and she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. The weight she'd carried her whole life, the heaviness of her body felt different now, powerful, hers. How do you feel? Jareth asked. Like I could fight an army. Let's not test that immediately. But he was pulling her close, kissing her with desperate relief. I thought I'd lost you. When I saw that blade come down, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Good, because we have a lot to discuss. Starting with the fact that you just became queen of the Northern Territories without any training or preparation, and my court is going to be absolutely impossible about it. Juliet looked around the great hall. Jareth's vampires were watching them with expressions ranging from shock to approval. Lucian caught her eye and offered a small bow, which seemed to be some kind of acceptance. I can handle impossible, Juliet said. I've been doing it my whole life. That's my girl. The next weeks were a blur of activity. Juliet had to learn to control her new strength, her new hunger for blood. Jareth was patient, teaching her to hunt ethically. Vampire society had strict rules about feeding only from willing donors or criminals. She met with members of the court, won some over with her directness and humanity, clashed with others who refused to accept a turned vampire as their queen. Through it all, Jareth was beside her, protective but not controlling, proud when she succeeded, supportive when she struggled, and true to his word, he courted her. They slipped away to the surface for midnight walks through the city, had picnics by the lake under the stars since sunlight was no longer an option, danced in the castle's ballroom with no one watching, Jareth teaching her the old-fashioned steps while laughing at her mistakes. Juliet's mother received the best treatment available, and her cancer went into remission. When Juliet visited her carefully, under the cover of darkness, her mother took one look at her daughter's new pale skin and red eyes and simply said, "You look happy, baby. That's all I ever wanted." 3 months after the wedding, Jareth took Juliet to the highest tower of the castle. The city spread below them, thousands of lights in the darkness. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Any of it?" Juliet leaned into his side, and he wrapped an arm around her. "Not for a second. Even though you were forced into this, even though the circumstances were insane, I wasn't forced. I chose. Every step of the way, I chose you." She turned to face him, taking his cold hands in hers. "You saw me, Jareth. Really saw me, not as too much or too big or too anything, just as me. How could I regret that? I fell in love with you that first night," Jareth admitted, walking toward me in that white dress, looking terrified and brave and so beautiful I could barely breathe. "When you told me the truth, I should have been angry, but all I could think was that fate had given me something real, something precious. You." "I love you too," Juliet whispered. "I think I have since you defended me in the courtyard, since you made sure I had food I was comfortable eating, since you held me while I cried and promised to take care of my mother. You're a good man, Jareth Presidium, the best I've ever known." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Juliet felt the bond between them, that blood connection forged during the wedding, sing with rightness. When they finally broke apart, Jareth pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring white gold with a blood-red stone that seemed to glow with inner fire. "I know we're already married," he said, "but this is the proper way, the human way. Juliet Fairchild, love of my immortal life. Will you stay with me? Through the centuries and the darkness and whatever challenges come. Will you be my queen, my partner, my heart?" "Yes," Juliet said through happy tears, 1,000 times, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he scooped her up. She was still soft and round and beautiful. Vampire transformation hadn't changed that, and spun her around while she laughed. Below them, the vampire city glowed. Above them, stars wheeled through the darkness, and between them, love burned bright and eternal, born from a mistake that had become the best thing to ever happen to either of them. They had forever now, forever to learn each other, to rule together, to build a life that was wholly theirs. And Juliet knew with absolute certainty that she wouldn't change a single moment of the strange, wonderful journey that had brought her here. Fate had made them royalty. Love had made them whole, and the future stretched before them, full of darkness and beauty and endless possibility. In the end, it didn't matter that she wasn't the noble heiress they'd all expected. She was something better. She was exactly who Jareth needed, who he'd been waiting centuries to find. And that, Juliet thought as Jareth carried her back down to their chambers, was the most romantic fate of all.